Alright, so last time I failed at talking about something normal because instead of talking about 10 of this type, I talked about 6. So I am, for sure, going to talk normally about normal things in this video. I got it this time, I believe. Now, not gonna lie, I have become very glad, second video in, that when talking about Pokemon not very many people are going to find themselves using, that this isn't a top 10 list, because not only would ranking these be objectively too controversial for this series, but also the fact that all 10 of the Pokemon of these exact type are like kind of equally not gonna be used for one reason or another. Maybe they aren't as popular, maybe they fell off after like one generation, maybe they're just unusable dex filler even if they got the fairy typing. Every day, I weep for Wigglytuff and Granbull. And yes, I know Granbull is pure fairy now. But yeah, all these Pokemon, for one reason or another, won't see use in any sort of play, even if they are someone's favorite. Also, you know the usual. Mismagius, Pokemon Crystal Clear, and Windmaker HD Let's Plays. Links will be in the description below. With that, let's get started. Alright, so I'm going to do my best not to talk about obvious dex filler normal types that are obviously unplayable for the most part of this list. Yeah, we know Spinda is bad. Go figure, right? So I kinda wanna use some of these segments, keyword some, because you'll know when I'm just here to roast a Pokemon for being bad, or to talk about Pokemon I actually think are kinda alright, but just struggle with being outclassed by Pokemon who did it better. A prime example of this is Braviary. It probably has one of the more interesting stat spreads out of the normal and flying types, and was clearly meant to be kinda good. Sheer Force and Defiant are good abilities. It's got good attack and speed. It's even got stuff like Close Combat, U-Turn, and Rock Slide for coverage, right? So, what went wrong here? Honestly, I couldn't even tell ya. I think the issue is that it falls under the big HP, big attack, nothing else archetype. And with normal flying being a questionable type for that both defensively and offensively, it wasn't working out. And sadly, you're not using Bro in your playthrough because evolving at level 54 should be illegal, and in Black and White, the game where you'd want to use the cool American bird, it's version exclusive to White. I don't know what this was about, man. So, Mega Audino is a weird one, because there are so many reasons you're not using My Little Baby Bungus. First and foremost, Audinite is never obtained in the base game of any game it is in, only the post game. Secondly, for some reason, they decided to give Mega Audino Healer, which, as I'm pretty sure I've said before, I hate. Thirdly, they were too cowardly to give it Regenerator, which would have actually made it viable in the only mode you can really use Audino in, and that's PvP. Unless you really want to use it in the Battle Mason or the Battle Tree that badly. It's just like, man, combine this with the fact that it has to use Wish and Protect for its recovery, and not, I don't know, Recover or something, and the fact that its stat spread, while not underwhelming, is not great, and you begin to see an issue. Mega Audino has it rough. So this is where you expect me to call Watchog like Dex Filler and one of the weaker normal types and how I'm going to go in on it for being weak. But no, that is not why I have come to berate Watchog. I've come to berate Watchog because Patrat is such a pain to level up. Let me explain. So Patrat is quite literally more difficult to level up because it requires more XP to level up than a Pokemon who you can catch on the same exact route who is more immediately useful, mind you. That's right, that's my beef. You can use Watchog in a playthrough to help catch Pokemon with tools like Thunder Wave and False Swipe and all that, right? It isn't entirely useless. But the process of getting to Watchog in comparison to getting into Herdier, and then Herdier evolves into the far superior Stoutland, yeah, get this thing away from me. Lenora is the only person to ever master this Pokemon. I know I talk rather negatively about Squawkabilly, and I mean a lot, but I think I'm slowly coming around to, let's say, 75% of the Squawkabillies. Kinda sorta, at least from a design standpoint, since they've committed crimes beyond redemption. However, 25% of all Squawkabillies have earned by ire simply for existing. Who on earth is actually going to tell me they want to use Banana Squawkabilly? Especially when you have Lime Squawkabilly, Blueberry Squawkabilly, and I don't know any fruits that are white. Why couldn't you be pink so I could call you Strawberry or something? You know what? This is petty, and besides the point. The part that matters is that who is actually trying to use the yellow Squawkabilly? These are the same types of people who think that dressing up in a banana suit and berating me about PB&J is still funny. You don't even have a competitive reason to use it when the green and blue one have guts, while yellow and white have sheer force. Personally, I'd rather use Blueberry Squawkabilly, because blue is cool. The only time I'm ever hyping up yellow is when I'm watching a Daisy-obsessed toxic Piplup try to win Bowser's Big Blast. If you know, you know. I find Wurdeer so fascinating to never use. By the time you've figured out its evolution method in your first run of Arceus, you've already basically established a hodgepodge of 6 idiots you carry with you in that game, because battling doesn't happen often enough in Legends Arceus for you to need to worry about a team comp. Except for that one time. And yeah, Wurdeer takes you around the region, but that's not your Wurdeer. That's just some other Wurdeer that is cooler and better than your stinky, smelly, bad Wurdeer. What makes Wurdeer so bad and smelly? Well, honestly, I think it has a poorly optimized stat spread. Like, let me get this straight. You managed to give Hisui and Arcanine, Sneasler and Ursaluna everything they needed to be good. And yet, they couldn't min-max Wurdeer? Its win con is basically agility, calm mind, and stored power in an actual game of Gen 9. And I'd rather use Galarian Articuno for that. And despite its base 103 HP, I wouldn't really call it bulky enough to both take hits and dish them out. It's really either one or the other with this guy. It requires too much setup to pull off, and I'd rather just use something else instead. Heck, even in Legends Arceus, I would rather use other Hisui Pokemon. Like, I don't know, Arcanine, Sneasler, Ursaluna, or Basculegion, who are all pretty awesome dudes. Unlike Wurdeer, who is kinda just there. So, Purugly is a Pokemon I actually quite like. I think it's a big, chubby kitty, and I just want to pet it, hug it, snuggle with it, and give it treats. It's just a big, bratty, brute force kitty. And I know that it's kind of a jerk, but it's also kind of endearing. I would unironically want to own one of these guys because while difficult to tame, I imagine a tame Purugly to just be a big fat baby. And something about that makes me really happy. Anyways, the reason no one uses it is because despite giving stuff like Latios and Ogerpon a run for their money, it doesn't have any other really good stat or normal stab. You have to play Last Resort or Giga Impact on it since it lost Return. And despite Legends Arceus giving it Double Edge, it can't be transferred to Gen 9. This means that until Game Freak quits fearing what Purugly could threaten to do with Terra Normal Double Edge, it gets to live in the shadow of Staraptor's Reckless Boosted Terra Normal Double Edge, which does way more damage to the point where once you use it, you just forget about Purugly. Now, as for your playthrough, I mean, sure. If you like keeping a useless Pokemon who doesn't do anything in the party until level 38, well then, be my guest. I just hope it treats you better than how Purugly treated Meowth in the anime. So, Bouffalant is a weird one, where I don't know what Bouffalant does. It's a bulky physical attacker with 95s in all of its defensive stats, and a 110 attack, plus having Reckless to beef up its signature move, Head Charge, which is slightly better double edge. And while it has insanely low special attack and speed, this stat spread feels actually kind of decent, really. Reckless, Sap Sipper, and Soundproof are 3 very real abilities, and stuff like Close Combat, Earthquake, Wild Charge, and Swords Dance give it a lot to work with. This Pokemon actually doesn't feel too bad on its own merit. Now, why no one uses it in a playthrough? Honestly, from my experience, it shows up really late, or it doesn't show up at all. And I never spot it in the wild by the time I actually want to use it. But in comp, this Pokemon is weird because it doesn't look that bad, at least not on paper. This is a bulky offensive mon with a roll on Trick Room if I've ever seen it. And yet, this is ZU in Gen 8. I guess Chinchino and Audino outclassed it as a normal type in PU, and stuff like Druddigan and Gigalith did its job better. Man, you really hate to see it. I mean, exactly outside of Solgaleo or Necrozma Duskmane, is there actually a strong lion Pokemon? Luxray, for those who classify it as a lion, is pretty bad, and so is Pyroar. Pretty sure I've gone off about everything wrong this Pokemon is in terms of its stats, design, and move pool. So, to keep this short and sweet, the abilities don't work, the stats are power crept by existing, and its coverage is about as deep as a small puddle. And then in the games I remember it being in off the top of my head, being X and Y and Scarlet and Violet, it was over for this Pokemon before it ever began. It's competing with these fire types for a slot on an in-game team, and these are much better options. So, I have gone on record to say that there's potential for Meloetta, and I still see it. I think that Meloetta has the secret sauce. It's just that the secret sauce happens to be incredibly hard to come by, and I've come to terms with that. Being forced to run Relic Song in order to get what is basically budget Mega Lopunny is pretty unfortunate, which kinda sucks. Being base 128 speed is faster than a decent chunk of current gen OU, and base 128 attack is nothing to scoff at. But being forced to run Relic Song in order to get to it means that you're wasting a turn, you're a lot slower as regular Meloetta, so you're likely to get hit really hard before you can do it, and there's a chance that said Relic Song isn't doing any real damage, because you most likely went Jolly Nature or Adamant. Unless you really wanted Relic Song to be a button, in which case you went Hasty. Either way, the cool form is forcefully locked, and I think Game Freak needs to let you choose what version of Meloetta you're allowed to use at the start. What are they afraid of? Pirouette being too good? Yeah, right. Remember, Game Freak doesn't do balance very often otherwise. They put Shadow Rider Calyrex and Terastallization in the same game for some reason. Yet, we can't just pick which Meloetta we get to use at the start of the match. Yeah, I know it's doing alright in NU, but NU isn't exactly the most widely played tier. And I feel like it didn't have to fall that low if Game Freak didn't do Homegirl dirty. This very unorthodox decision is why people don't use Meloetta. And Meloetta, sadly being locked to the DLC, and usually in the post-game from what I remember, means you don't get to enjoy it in a run-through for your game without some level of cheating or just trading it over to yourself, which is not very fun. Now I'm gonna make a Pirouette set and ponder about what could have been. You know, unless I'm just missing something, I see no love for Dunsparce 2. I know it fits the Braviary mold of big HP, big attack, but the Dunsparce has, like, actually cool stuff to it, like Thunderwave. Oh. Did they take away Thunderwave from this line in Gen 9? Oh. Never mind. Now I see why no one uses this stuff anymore. Taking away Thunderwave from it means it can't use the Coil, Headbutt, Roost, and T-Wave set with Serene Grace. Well, great. Now I don't want to play with this mon anymore. Outside of NatDex RU, where I can play T-Wave. Alright. No? I'm not gonna do that. That's fine, yeah. I guess sadly, the Dunsparce, despite being a Gen 9 mon, wasn't given the fancy broken things other Pokemon got. It's mediocre in a gen full of min-maxed insane stuff. This is a shame, man. Well, I'm bummed out again, now that I've had to do research and learn the hard truth about the Dunsparce. You all can just, I don't know, tell me your favorite Smeargle set or something. Joke answers only.